are about to witness the very exciting story that will open new sights in familiar surroundings.
The atomic age was born.
It is a story of a city seeking new horizons in a resolute contest with great challenges.
Welcome to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. This episode we're going to be talking about antibiotic overdose. And with me I have Alyssa Hartman, who is with Food and Water Watch. Alyssa, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
And so you have been looking at issues that have to do with raising animals and raising produce and using antibiotics, which is a major area of interest for you. Do I have that correct?
That is right, yes.
Okay, now one of the things that we're concerned about is antibiotic resistance associated with family farms. And a lot of people don't even know what antibiotic resistance is. Could you tell us a little bit about that before you tell us what a factory farm is?
Sure, so antibiotic resistance happens when bacteria are formed that are not able to be treated by antibiotics like you typically would be able to. So the way this happens on factory farms, which are large-scale animal feeding operations, where
they're not like your grandparents' farm
exactly
with 10
not.
or 12
they
hogs.
Have,
how many hogs or cattle could they have?
Sure, 1,000 easily, likely more. 1,000 is the minimum qualification by the Department of Agriculture for a factory farm. So it's large-scale animal feeding operations, and the problem with this involving antibiotics is that in the feed that animals eat every day, the grain that they consume, a low dose of antibiotics is mixed in with that grain.
Oh, so every time an animal eats food, it is taking antibiotics.
Exactly. And the problem with that is that these antibiotics are given in very low doses in the food. And for anyone out there who has taken antibiotics in their life, you might recall that you're often given them in a very small quantity, but it's a high dosage.
Right.
So it kills all the bacteria in your body and doesn't allow for those specific bacteria you're fighting against to multiply. But what happens when you feed antibiotics at a low dose over an extended period of time, which in the case of these animals is their entire lifespan, it causes resistant bacteria in the animal's gut to develop that are never fully killed off because these antibiotics are only killing weak bacteria, and then the strong bacteria that are resistant to the antibiotics multiply.
So basically the factory farms are helping to breed a lot of bacteria which will be resistant to the antibiotics and could then spread to humans.
That's exactly true. And the reason that we're so worried about factory farms in particular is because 80% of the antibiotics sold in the US are sold to factory farms.
Wow, it's not humans taking 90 or 95%. Humans are only consuming about 20%.
That's correct.
Well, why in the world would they do that? Why would a big factory farm, it seems like it must be very expensive to buy that many antibiotics. Why would they do that?
Yes, it is kind of a confusing issue. So the reason that this happens is because typically on factory farms, which are these large-scale animal feeding operations like we talked about, living conditions typically are not very good. There's a lot of overcrowding. Animals are in really filthy conditions, and this is sort of a breeding ground for bacteria. So the antibiotics are given to healthy animals to try to prevent them from getting sick in the first place. And they're also given to make the animals grow faster.
Well, the things that I see on TV about farming, and when people are advertising meat, they're always showing really happy cows and really happy hogs and really happy chickens. Would you or I be able to go in and film the way that animals are raised to show it to people?
Certainly not for the most part in factory farms. I can't speak for every farm, but across the board, no, that would not be a healthy, happy place. The animals are in really bad conditions. Oftentimes they may never see grass in their life, so it's not a good situation.
Okay,
and this is just one of many problems
on factory farms.
So the owner's
not going to want you to come in and film what the conditions are?
Likely not.
Okay. And so I guess one thing you might be able to do is, if you're worried about the condition of animals, you might ask somebody who sells animals for meat, can I come in and film your animals? And if the person has family farm, the person would say, sure. If the person says, no, you can't film my animals, you might say, well, what sort of, what's going on here?
That might be true, yes.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Personally, I don't eat meat, except fish, occasionally. Now, does that mean that I'm in the clear and I'm not really contributing to this problem at all?
Unfortunately, that is not the case. And that is because these antibiotic-resistant bacteria that are fostered and born on factory farms, a major way that they're transmitted is through fecal matter of the animal, so their manure.
Okay.
And manure on these large-scale farms are stored oftentimes in what's called lagoons.
Right,
which
really
are
huge.
Just pits of poop, basically.
Okay.
That's what they are. Yep, pits of poop. And so what happens is the bacteria is in that manure, and so that can leak into water. It can leach out into waterways. It can be picked up by insects, like a fly, for example, and carried to other locations. So unfortunately, antibiotic-resistant bacteria is out into the environment, and you don't have to eat a piece of meat ever to get an antibiotic-resistant infection. One phrase that we sometimes use is you could be a vegan living in Manhattan, and you could still get an antibiotic-resistant infection.
Okay, so even people who are not contributing to the problem by eating meat are still vulnerable to getting not being able to resist the body not being able to resist antibiotics.
Exactly, and the most at-risk people are the same folks that are the most at risk for all sorts of medical conditions. So young children, people who have a compromised immune system that's not functioning at its best possible levels, and then also older people.
So the rule of thumb for a lot of diseases or resistance to health problems is the very old, the very young, and the very sick. You can say that for just about everything.
Yep.
And what's the Food and Drug Administration? Aren't they doing a good job of regulating antibiotics?
So unfortunately, they are not. The Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, has known about this issue of the development of antibiotic-resistant bacteria since 1977, and has put in place no measures at all, other than ones that are voluntary, to kind of curb this issue. Unfortunately, oftentimes with big corporations like this and in groups that are trying to make a lot of money, voluntary measures aren't often taken very seriously. So since they haven't implemented any real legislation saying you cannot do these practices, the practices have continued to happen, and these rates of antibiotic-resistant infections have gotten much worse. So last year, the CDC reported, this would be for
what's the
2013,
CDC?
and that's the Center for Disease Control.
Okay.
They report on a number of different disease-related topics. And for the US, there were over 2 million people who got an antibiotic-resistant infection. Those numbers are probably much higher. That was the amount they
2
reported.
million, that's incredible.
And 23,000 people died because of antibiotic-resistant infection. So certainly this is a major health problem.
Now, did I hear you say that it's a voluntary program?
That's correct.
Well, does the Department of Transportation advocate a voluntary adherence to speed signs or speed limits?
Not that I'm aware of.
I would think that, if you, it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that as a citizen, I have to act in a responsible way. But if I were a big corporation, I get to choose what I want to do and what I don't do.
Sure. Yeah, that's a problem.
now tell me this. What about the White House? Did the White House issue a statement in August or September of 2014 about antibiotic resistance?
Yes, that's correct. So the White House did put out a statement in September of 2014. Unfortunately, the statement didn't have any language about factory farms, which, because 80% of antibiotics sold in the US are sold to factory farms, they obviously are a major player in this problem. And so the White House failing to mention them, I mean, that's not even getting at the beginning of the roots of the problem. So that's frustrating.
There's a movie that you told me about called Down to Earth Farming. We're going to show a few clips from Down to Earth Farming, and then we'll be back to the show in just a few minutes.
Baxter Black wrote this, and this is the way we raise our livestock and what I think is important about the way we raise them. I do solemnly swear, as shepherd of the flock, to accept the responsibility of the animals put in my care, to tend to their basic needs of food and shelter, to minister to their ailments, to put their well-being before my own if need be, and to relieve their pain and suffering up to and including the final bullet. I swear to treat them with respect. To always remember that we have made them dependent on us and therefore have put their lives in our hands. As God is my witness.
I always think everybody's goal should be to build your land where you leave it better than what you found it.
Our system is basically that everybody's moving away from their rear end as much as possible. The way that we do that is like all the feeders for the chickens, we always try to keep them out on the new grass. The old fecal material is behind them and the green grass is in front of them, and we just keep trying to move everybody through the system. So when you do that, you do dramatically reduce incidence of disease. Do you completely eliminate disease? No. So, from a soil health standpoint, we're always moving birds so that, manure spread evenly across fields. We're not getting a concentrated area of manure in one specific spot. The system works. It's the best system on this farm so far.
Sky and fire in the air. Desire burns between them. One big bush is gonna get you.
There's a growing interest in how is our food produced, what type of system produces it. The majority of our population in the United States has not grown up on farms. They don't have a farming background, but everybody eats. That's a logical way for them to interact and for them to enter into this discussion about what is this food system.
Lead your way, sing your song, moving every day, going further on.
In the time that I've farmed, I've seen it go from least cost commodity type of thinking to the consumer connection to how their food is raised and having a certain way they want it raised, and the adaptability of those of us on smaller farms to say, yeah, if you want it raised that way, I'll raise it that way. I see that movement growing, and I'm very encouraged by that.
You've been all around and see them.
There's a growing number of folks that really want to have a voice in how their food is produced. They value having a relationship with the farmer.
Lead your way, sing your song, moving every day, going further on.
I think that the more voices that we have that are participating in this movement of, what type of food system am I supporting? What does agriculture look like in our country? What do we want it to look like? Looking at the pipeline and, where are we going to be 50 years from now? It's what the next generation coming up is going to be doing.
As a national movement, it takes everyone. It takes all of us being engaged and being politically engaged, because we all eat 3 times a day. We all have 3 times a day to choose what we put on our bodies and where it comes from. It behooves all of us to remember that, voting is not the only civic act that you do. So make those choices locally and then turn around and make sure that your elected officials also know what you want and take that step to being part of the national work, being part of the movement to get a better food system.
We in America, because of our disconnection, we actually fear food now. The beauty of boxed chicken nuggets in the form of Dino's the dinosaur is that they've been chlorinated, fumigated, irradiated, procrastinated, and adulterated enough that they're sterile, but our bodies aren't sterile. We've got this whole 3 trillion beings inside of us that don't want unpronounceable food. And so as you become aware of what's available and you surround yourself with that, guess what? It moves you from fear to faith.
We are the Junior Black Chamber of Commerce, an organization that's creating the business leaders of tomorrow. Catch our new television series, Harambe 101, on Green Time TV. We want to thank all the business professionals who gave up their time mentoring what promises to be the next generation of movers and shakers. You too can help save the future of our underserved communities by supporting the Junior Black Chamber of Commerce with your charitable contributions. And remember, what you give today will help make a brighter future tomorrow.
Send your donations to the JBCC at P.O. Box 35257, St. Louis, Missouri 63135.
The Sierra Club is the largest and most influential grassroots environmental organization in the United States. If you care about clean air, clean water, and preserving open space, join the Sierra Club. In Missouri, the Sierra Club's projects include promoting energy efficiency and clean power sources like wind and solar, cleaning up air pollution by retiring dirty, outdated, coal-fired power plants, protecting Missouri's parks like the Ozark National Scenic Riverways. We need you to get more involved. To join the Sierra Club, make a donation, or to find out about Sierra Club events in your area, visit our website at www.missouri.sierraclub.org or call us at 314-644-1011.
Welcome back to Green Time. We just saw a few clips from the movie Down to Earth Farming, and we were talking about some of the problems with antibiotic resistance on farms, especially factory farms. And with me I have Alyssa Hartman with Food and Water Watch, and we're talking basically about the problem of antibiotic overdose. Now, Alyssa, were you part of making that movie that we saw?
Yeah, that's correct. So last year in 2013, I worked with 13 other students at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana.
Oh, great.
All of us took a semester off from our regular classes to work on this film. So we got to have a better understanding of the local farming movement that was happening in Muncie, and then also got to go to DC, to Washington, D.C., to talk to some legislators and national organizations that work on local food and agriculture issues as a whole, and it was just a great experience.
Yeah, and I noticed there were a lot of scenes, not just the ones we saw, but I looked through the whole movie, which I think we saw about 6 minutes of it, and I think it's about a 31-minute movie.
Yes.
And there's a whole lot of scenes, people talking about their own farms. And so I guess you had a really good opportunity to talk with people about their farms as you were producing it.
Yes. So I'll just say, if folks want to look at this movie at home, you can find the whole film available on downtoearthfarming.org.
Okay, great.
Yeah, but the farm that's actually featured in the film is called Becker Farms, and they're located in Moreland, Indiana. And I actually had the opportunity to work for them for about the past year before I took my current position. So I learned a lot in that job about how you can manage livestock and animals in an effective way that not only isn't harmful to the ecosystem, but is actually really beneficial. So the topic that movie talks about a lot is that when this family bought their farm about 7 years ago, the soil quality was very poor. It had been farmed in mainly corn and soybeans for about a decade, and the elements that you want to have rich quantities of in your soil, things like potassium and phosphorus and nitrogen, were very low.
So you mean growing the same crop over and over again for 10 years doesn't help the soil?
That's correct, yes.
Wow, what a thing that you would
amazing.
Hope,
Eureka.
You'd hope that a farmer would understand
Yes.
that, but it's amazing that agricultural schools seem to unteach people how to farm.
Sure, it's a little confusing. So this family bought this farm, soil quality was really bad, and the reason that they started using so many different kinds of livestock was to increase their soil quality. So they have a practice called rotational grazing that a lot of farms throughout the US and other countries certainly use. And that practice is to continually have animals moving around the pasture, because animals' manure is a really great source of a lot of these nutrients that soil needs. So as long as it's not too concentrated in one spot, having manure on your land can be really beneficial for the soil. So the practice that they use with the rotational grazing, they have cattle that graze over the land and poop, and then chickens and turkeys and ducks and other poultry come behind them and help scratch that manure into the soil and also poop. And so it's just a whole system of circling around, and it's really, really great for the soil health and all the microbes and things that you want to be living in your soil.
Well, let me ask you this. What does that have to do with antibiotics? You know, it's when animals are raised like that, are you really able to raise them without antibiotics?
Yes, you can. And that farm in particular, and many of the others that we talked to, did not use antibiotics in their production of animals. And they're able to do that because of the management practices they use.
Okay.
So by not keeping animals in really overcrowded and filthy living conditions, you're able to produce really healthy animals that don't need antibiotics. And certainly sometimes things happen and animals get sick and you treat them. But this routine use of low doses of antibiotics is not necessary when you're managing livestock in a good way.
Right.
And it's also economically viable to do this. In 2000, the year 2000, Denmark fully phased out the use of antibiotics on pig farms in Denmark. And Denmark is the world's largest exporter of pork, so this is a big deal. They're about the size of the herd that the state of Iowa has, and about 3/5 the size of Iowa Denmark is. And since phasing out antibiotic use in 2000, they have seen greater increase in production, and their animals are healthier, and the cost associated with this, people often wonder, is it going to be so much more expensive to raise animals this way? And with the policies backing them, that this was a national ban everyone in Denmark had to do, the cost of raising a pig only increased by about 1 pound for the entire life cycle of the pig. That'd be like about $1.60.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, when I take antibiotics, which is rare when I get sick, you know, the doctors always say, well, you have to use the full dose of the antibiotics, but you know, you don't just keep on taking them forever.
Sure.
And you only take it when you actually need it. It really should make everybody question, if I'm eating meat that is grown under conditions where the animal has to constantly be taking antibiotics, what sort of conditions are they? It's unbelievable. But one thing I wanted to get back to, which you did mention, could you just briefly tell me what course you were taking at that school when you were making the film?
Sure. So my degree is called Natural Resources and Environmental Management, which sort of encompasses lots of different environmental issues. But I particularly am interested in agriculture, so I sort of made my own degree program by taking specific classes and doing internship experiences and other things. So it was not really a specific...
It wasn't a film course?
No, though there were people who did film in the course. It was through a group at Ball State, but it was 14 Ball State students that worked on the film.
Basically we could reach a conclusion that most universities would be interested in a program like that, and if anybody watching this show is going to a college or university, the chances are very good they could get together with other students and produce their own movie.
Yeah.
Okay, now let me ask you this. What I've heard about antibiotics is, in addition to keeping animals healthy or less sick, that they make the animals grow faster. Is that a good reason to use them to increase the growth of the animal?
So there were some studies done in the 1950s that had some correlations to the fact that using antibiotics would make the animal grow faster. Since then, those studies haven't been able to be replicated effectively, so we don't even know if that is factual. But one way or the other, it's not safe to be using this practice to make animals grow faster. It just is, the costs so outweigh.
Right.
Greatly outweigh the benefits.
So we can't say for certain that antibiotics don't make the animals grow faster, but we could say that it's still up in the air and we're not certain.
And it's a dangerous practice.
Very, very dangerous. Tell me this, if we don't do anything about this, and if we're not effective in controlling legislation, what sort of things would be in your crystal ball for the future?
Yeah, so this is the part that's really scary to me. A lot of the antibiotics that are used on factory farms are the same types of antibiotics that are used in human medicine, things like penicillin and tetracycline, which are drugs that we need as humans to be able to survive infections that before we had these antibiotics used to kill us. And it's not unrealistic to think that in the coming years, if we don't do something about this, these drugs just won't work anymore. And this has been like the crux of modern medicine, is these antibiotics. And
I've often heard that the antibiotics are the one medicine which there's absolutely no ambiguity that they actually have an effect and they actually help people.
Exactly. And we could lose all of that hard work that's been done over decades and decades, and something that we've been so dependent on as a society, it could just be lost because we're misusing them.
Great. Okay. We're going to take a break now, and then when we come back for the last part of the show, we're going to be talking about what sort of things that people can do to confront the issue.
Since 1990, the Gateway Green Alliance has worked on environmental and social justice campaigns in St. Louis.
The Gateway Greens have brought dedicated activists to speak at Black and Green Wednesday programs, the annual Pesto Feast, Martin Luther King Day, May Day, and Kwanzaa celebrations.
The Gateway Green Alliance is best known for opposing genetically contaminated foods. We invite activists and scholars from around the world to participate in safe food action and bring their creative art.
We need your support to keep going. Please send your $60 membership check or your $30 low-income check. Best of all, come to a Black and Green Wednesday program, 7:30 p.m. on the first Wednesday of the month at Legacy Books and Cafe.
What if we were served a side of truth?
I'll take a super bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich.
Okay, that'll be meat from a pig who can't even turn around, an egg from a bird kept in a cage so small she can't spread her wings, and the milk of a cow whose calf is taken at birth to make veal. Ma'am?
Welcome back to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. I'm with Alyssa Hartman with Food and Water Watch, and we are talking about antibiotic overdose, the problems about using antibiotics, which we've covered for the first part of the show. Alyssa, for the last few couple of minutes, we can talk about what sort of things that people can do. What sort of solutions do you see to the problem of the overuse of antibiotics on the farm, on the factory farm?
Yeah, so Food and Water Watch is doing work throughout the U.S., tackling municipalities and asking cities throughout the U.S. to take a hold on this issue and push their local legislators to do something about that. So that's the work that I'm doing here in St. Louis. But there are cities all over the United States that are working on this same issue. So that's really encouraging. Unfortunately, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and Congress have failed to act on these things. So something needs to be done about this, and it's not getting done. So we sort of need to push the envelope on this.
Yeah, we know that something will be done. The Congress will act. It's only whether the Congress acts before millions of people die from antibiotic resistance, or whether they do it before that and prevent the disaster. Are there other cities that have been successful in sort of passing resolutions?
Yeah, so as of September 25th, 26 cities across the U.S. have passed this legislation.
What year?
And this is in 2014.
2014, okay.
Yes. And our goal as Food and Water Watch is by the end of 2014 to have passed 50 resolutions in cities throughout the U.S. And it's interesting because you might assume that it's like a lot of very progressive cities, but cities like Cleveland, Ohio, and Alexandria, Virginia have passed these resolutions. So it's something that is a huge public health concern, and it matters that all of us take a stand on this issue.
I want to thank you for coming, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this episode of Green Time. Catch us next week.